And who is my neighbor? Believe it or not, this was a hot topic in the time of Jesus. Love of God and love of neighbor are intertwined. It is crucial to be able to identify the neighbor. One wouldn't want to waste any love on the wrong sort of person. The one who asks the question is a student of the law, a Torah scholar. He especially needs to get it right. The parable with which Jesus answers him shatters any expectations he may have had. Jews and Samaritans harbored ancient, deep-seated feelings of mutual hostility, based both on differences in worship and historical acts of reciprocal aggression. This Samaritan has an additional strike against him. Because he is traveling in Judean territory, and because he has with him oil, wine, and money, he is most likely a trader, profiting at the expense of others, and considered no better than a thief. We are not told much about the victim. His identity seems to be beside the point. Presumably, he is a Jew, yet he is not a particularly sympathetic figure. As the target of robbers, he may well have been in possession of stolen property. In agrarian societies such as first-century Palestine, the few who control the land exploit the many who work it, producing what are known as social bandits who rob from the rich to give to the poor. Jesus' peasant audience would most likely have identified with the robbers. We are shocked at what seems to us the callous and cowardly behavior of the priest and Levite. The earliest audiences would not have given a second thought to their failure to show compassion. They are just doing their job, obeying the law, which requires them to keep their distance from the dead. If they were to approach a dead man and they could not know whether he was dead or not without going close to him, they would be defiled and barred from the priesthood for life. Throughout history and every culture, men have created ways to impose order and meaning on the world. To that end, they establish categories and classes within categories. Birds eat fruits and grains, fish have fins and scales, land animals with cleft hooves chew their cud. Each member of each class was expected to manifest all the characteristics of that class, and only that class. Those failing to do so were designated unclean or impure. It didn't stop there. Divisions and subdivisions were extended to human beings, who were designated pure or impure according to arbitrary categories of gender, race, nationality, caste, sexuality, and so on. The human species has an inadequate sense of itself as a species, Walter Wink writes. It is unmistakably clear, he continues, that human beings must develop a communal sense that incorporates all members of the species. Humanity is not yet humane. The Torah, or law, of which Leviticus is a part, was God's great gift to Israel. It supplied meaning, direction, and a code of conduct. Ancient religion was not about personal salvation, but the preservation and welfare of society. The purity laws were intended to preserve the holiness of Israel. We find some of the Levitical prohibitions amusing and some horrifying. Some we have abandoned, and some we are still struggling with. Some Christians claim that Jesus replaced the law, that he is to the New Testament what the Torah is to the Old Testament. But Jesus was an observant Jew who was always guided by the Spirit, if not the letter of the law. I think of the Torah as the user's manual for life, and Jesus as the instructional video. And who is my neighbor? Certainly, neighbor is not limited to one who lives nearby, nor, as some would have it, is it equivalent to friend, having nothing to do with pre-existing affection. In modern times, neighbor in this context has come to signify our fellow man, sick. But the Greek word used here, plesion, is a particular, not a general term. Fellow man is unsatisfactory because it is too broad and too abstract. It is what Hubert Coriel, my 9th grade English teacher, called a glittering generality, which we were to avoid at all costs in our writing and in our thinking, I would add. I can bask in warm feelings for humanity and still cross the street to avoid anyone who makes me uncomfortable. There is a spatial aspect of plesion, an element of encounter. Both particular and all-inclusive, neighbor defies category. One cannot say in advance who the neighbor is. It is anyone with whom we come in contact. It turned out that looking people in the eye, as I was taught to do growing up, was not only about being polite to my parents' friends. It is acknowledging the humanity of the person living on the street, the acquaintance who has fallen on hard times, the one who may have wronged me in the past. Loving the plesion is infinitely more difficult than loving humanity in the abstract. Not only does the Torah scholar not understand neighbor, neither he nor the priests understand love, that it is in infinite supply and need not be doled out sparingly. The professionals who have studied and analyzed and parsed and committed the law to memory can recite the great commandment, but they do not grasp its meaning. Amos readily admits that he is a non-professional, neither a prophet by trade nor the son of a prophet. Perhaps that is why he can see God's plumb line against which Israel is measured and found wanting, and hear God's directive to share that vision with the northern kingdom. For more than 2 years, this country has witnessed endless, tedious, and convoluted arguments about whether or not the president obstructed justice. It should be clear to any sentient being that he has done and continues to do so on many levels and in many ways. One would think that his firing of officials who thwart his authoritarian agenda, paying off of inconvenient potential witnesses, ordering of former staff not to testify, and refusal to hand over financial statements and tax returns would be sufficient evidence. There is more. Amos is perhaps best known for the immortal words, "Let justice roll down like waters, and righteousness like an ever-flowing stream." The justice Donald Trump is accused of obstructing is particular, partial, and narrowly defined. The obscene policies of this administration flagrantly and systematically violate every conceivable type of justice: economic, environmental, social. A few examples. The recent tax cuts apply to entities that need them the least and increase the existing vast economic disparity. In the interest of corporate profits, rivers and streams are increasingly polluted and air quality is compromised. Smog is returning to the Los Angeles basin. The only acknowledged human rights are those of fetuses. Refugees are caged in unspeakable conditions, and immigrant communities are terrorized by threats of deportation raids, whether those raids actually occur or not. Divine justice extends to all aspects of human life. If we limit its definition, we miss the comprehensive obstruction of justice which contaminates us all. In their new book, Darkness Now Visible, Patriarchy's Resurgence and Feminist Resistance, Carol Gilligan and David Richards maintain that patriarchy, which many had denied or written off as outdated, came out of hiding in the run-up to the 2016 election. Patriarchy, they argue, is the original structural injustice that allows, invites, and undergirds all ideologies that discriminate, exploit, and shame. By socializing us to separate reason and emotion, associating the former with men and the latter with women, patriarchy aims to produce real men and good girls. Based on their studies of male subjects, the male giants of moral development theory concluded that women are morally inferior. While they can learn from immersion in the male world of commerce and competition, women by nature stop developing at stage 3 of Lawrence Kohlberg's 6-stage scale, where morality is conceived in interpersonal terms and goodness is equated with helping and pleasing others. Real men are loftier creatures, governed by rules, laws, and abstract universal principles. Yet research shows that the splitting of reason from emotion, like the separation of the self from relationships, rather than being markers of progress or development, are manifestations of injury or trauma. When I say women, I include men, says Elizabeth Schussler-Fiorenza. This always gets a laugh, but it is not just a clever inversion of the traditional use of man as a synonym for person. It proposes woman as a more accurately inclusive term for all who are marginalized by the categories, expectations, rules, and judgments of patriarchy. And everyone is damaged by the patriarchal project. One need only look around to see the ravages it has wrought on the human spirit. Men, shamed by secret knowledge of their failure to achieve real manhood, turn to violence against themselves or others. Women who conform to patriarchal demands become invisible. Those who resist are punished. That there is such a caricature of a real man in the White House may signal the demise of the system he represents. But its death throes could be dangerous, and we must beware lest we be destroyed as well. Movements of resistance are multiplying. The most important and most difficult resisting we must do is internal, refusing to accept the patriarchal constructions of manhood and womanhood for ourselves and for others. Laws regulating love are a mainstay of a patriarchal order, observe Gilligan and Richards, given the power of love to upset hierarchy. Elsewhere, Richards writes, love that crosses the boundaries by resisting the love laws of patriarchy frees an ethically resisting voice, a voice that resists injustice, including the injustices of racism, sexism, homophobia, anti-Semitism, caste and class. The list is endless. In the parable of the Good Samaritan, Jesus makes it clear that compassion supersedes commandment. This is not a manly message. Jesus is not a real man. He requires a different designation. Thus, in Wink's words, incarnation became a doctrine about Jesus, not a task for all of us to accomplish. Categories and boundaries eliminate the ambiguity that patriarchy finds intolerable. It is said that maturity is the ability to live with ambiguity. It is long past time for us to grow up and not only tolerate, but celebrate and embrace the ambiguity and diversity of life. Amen. Thank you.